What's up, Husker Nation? It's 1/4 of the Play the Fight Song podcast here. The Nebraska side. The fandom is coming out. We're finally releasing some parts where we can actually talk as a fan without giving you our professional opinion. If you've never listened to the Play the Fight Song podcast, give it a try. It's college football focused. It's for diehards. It's not for the casual fan. We don't like those people. We bash them all day. So if you love college football, give it a shot. But we're here to talk Nebraska. Nebraska has a matchup this week at home against Northwestern. It's a big game for the Big Ten West. I'm not going to reveal too much because I said something on the podcast that's dropping this week, but I think Nebraska still has a chance to win this division. I think everybody's kind of chalking it up to Iowa, but with the Big Ten West, we've seen weirder things, and I think Nebraska can find themselves in a spot to potentially win this division, and whoever wins this division is going to get spanked by 40 points. I think everybody can agree on that. I think everybody's established that, but it's worth mentioning. However, let's take a look at this week. Northwestern rolls into Lincoln, same record as us, 3-3, 1-2 in the conference, but not really the same path. I mean, they matched up with Howard, not this last week, but the week before because they were on bye like us. It's the first time we matched up with them, both teams coming off a bye. We performed very badly with them coming off of a bye. We performed very poorly with ourselves coming off a bye. So it should be interesting to see kind of how the Matt Rule era looks coming off of a bye. But I have high hopes considering where Northwestern's at as a program. In case you've been asleep for the past 8 months, Pat Fitzgerald's no longer the head coach here. He was relieved of his duties back when all those allegations were going around. In recent news, he came out and he is being sued by, he is suing the University of Northwestern for wrongfully firing him. So we'll see how that all goes down, and hopefully their focus is so far off that we can just take it to them, kind of like we took it to Illinois. Mentioning Illinois, I know you haven't seen any recaps from me. I think that we should have probably beat them by 7 to 10 points more at least, if not 21 points more. I think we need to be more effective in the red zone, which I'll touch on later. But let's take a look at the Cats. Leading the Cats is quarterback Ben Bryant. It is his 6th year of college football. He's played a lot of college football game. His first 3 years were at the University of Cincinnati. Then he went to Eastern Michigan. Then he went back to Cincinnati. And then with the departure of head coach Luke Fickell, who is now at Wisconsin, he is back into the Big Ten without his head coach at Northwestern. A guy like Pat Fitzgerald, I'm sure, is more than appealing to go play for in your 6th year of school, but now he's playing for not him. So he's been good. He's 95 for 161 for 926 and 6 scores. He's also thrown 3 picks. That's kind of the main focus you'll find with this Northwestern offense is they're going to want to throw the ball, and they're going to want to throw the ball often. Good part for them. Bad part for Nebraska is that's what kind of Nebraska forces people to do because our run defense, as you all know, has been substantially better, if not the best in the Big Ten all year long, with the exception of Michigan, who has a good chance to win the national title this year. In the backfield, though, led by Cam Porter, he hasn't really been able to get going yet. He's an effective back that we've seen in years past. He hasn't rushed for 300 yards yet. And to put that in perspective, Harburg, with 2 games less under his belt, is well over 300 yards, and he has 2 more scores than Porter. And Northwestern really hasn't established a ground game all year. The receiver you want to look out for is Bryce Kurtz. He's their go-to receiver. He's their leading receiver, and he kind of sparked that comeback they had against Minnesota, which we'll touch on when we look at their schedule. He's 24 receptions, 327 yards this year, and 3 scores. And if you're like, hey, that's not that impressive, Nebraska's leading receiver is Billy Kemp, and he has 219 yards total in the year. So they're better receiving core than Nebraska across the board, but that's not saying much considering how much Nebraska runs the football now and kind of the new offense under Marcus Satterfield. Taking a look at the team ranks, Northwestern passes the ball for 203 yards a game and rushes it for 103. Pass-first offense. They kind of find themselves in these situations in games where they have to throw the ball because none of their losses have really been close. And their wins they've been down at some point within the game. That's just kind of how this team operates, you're going to find. And then on the defensive side of the ball, they give up 189 yards a game, and they give up 172 yards rushing per game. So that's where this Northwestern team falls heavily. Their defense is not very good. But the bright spot for them is Nebraska's offense really hasn't found their stride yet. They have in spots, but then they've been really bad for 3 or 4 drives in a row. And I think that's kind of why you've seen this fan base, our fan base, kind of fall down on Marcus Satterfield's views and offense that he kind of runs. So it should be really, really interesting to see what Nebraska comes out with against this Northwestern defense. I think it's kind of the same game plan we had for Colorado, where we need to establish the ground game early. And if we don't, we're going to find it anyway because they don't defend the run well at all. Shaw Taylor from Minnesota had the best game he's had all year against Northwestern in their loss. We'll talk about that game. Don't worry. But that's kind of where I think it's going to be the most effective for this Nebraska offense is through the ground, and that's going to be with Anthony Grant and Emmett Johnson. I don't want people to get down on Emmett Johnson. I know he fumbled the ball against Illinois, but he's a good back. He's going to have a good future here, and he's going to play a lot of snaps in Husker Red for a while. So get used to him. He's good. He's explosive. Kind of saw it on a couple of plays last week against Illinois, 2 weeks ago now, against Illinois, where he's a pretty explosive runner and he can make things happen in the open field. So I'm excited for Emmett Johnson this week. I hope he gets some more reps. I want to ask you a question. While you're listening to this, you don't have to look at my ugly face anyway. Scroll down and comment down below. Who would you like to see, Henrik Harburg, or you want to see Jeff Sims? I am probably one of the few, and I get yelled at by Husker friends and Husker family all the time. I would like to see more snaps for Jeff Sims, especially this week. I think that we can use them both. I don't think anything is wrong with Harburg. I think they're both equal quarterbacks, but Jeff needs to find his stride. He's still a good athlete. I understand his turnovers come, but if you split time, he's on the field a lot less in worse situations. I think it's very hard for us to compare Jeff Sims the first 2 weeks of the year against Minnesota and Colorado on the road, and then Harburg kind of gets those two cupcakey games to kind of figure things out and learn an offense and build a confidence. So that's a big difference. So I'd like to see Sims get some snaps this week if he's healthy. I know he hasn't really been fully healthy yet. They keep saying he's limited, but I would like to see a little bit more out of Jeff Sims. On the outside, Marcus Washington obviously is out for the rest of the year. That stinks, but we need Billy Kemp to step up. I feel like Kemp is one of those guys that we've seen be good, very good at the beginning of the year or the beginning of the game even. And then he just kind of tapers off and they kind of figure him out towards the end of the game. I'd like to see him make some impacts late in the game. I feel like that's going to be a big piece for this Nebraska offense going forward because we need to win a couple more games, 3 more games to get to the point kind of where we would deem this to be successful. And I think the Big Ten is so wide open this year and college football is so wide open this year that there's a real opportunity for that to happen and be successful. So big week for Nebraska. I think they can get it done. I want to point out and go back to kind of this Northwestern team and what you should look for. They beat Minnesota in overtime. They beat them 37-34. I don't know who all has watched the highlights. 2 points on this. 1, the lady announcing the game should be fired. She should never announce again. That was terrible. 2, 12 minutes left in the fourth quarter, and Northwestern was down to Minnesota 31-10. This was a Scott Frost-esque blow, fall apart, whatever you want to call it, from Minnesota, which that ain't no problem. I'm not a PJ Fleck fan myself, but 31-10, 12 minutes left, and you blow the lead and lose in overtime. That's a lot of self-inflicted wounds, a lot of bad coaching mistakes, and not a lot of success on the offensive side of the ball. So that shows you 2 things. Northwestern's going to fight whether or not Nebraska gets up early. I know Rule makes it super clear that this team doesn't care if they're up early. It's all about how they finish. We've seen it go both ways. If Nebraska rolls out like they did after the lightning delay against Louisiana Tech, this game's going to be close and we could probably lose it. If Nebraska keeps rolling how they are and the defense keeps playing to their standard, I don't think this game's going to be close, and it shouldn't be close. I think Nebraska's just solely the better team on paper, in person, better defense, more consistent offense. One thing that does worry me, I think we have to look at Northwestern and kind of realize that they know who they are, right? Whether or not Fitzgerald's their coach, they kind of know that this year with the interim coach so late, right before Big Ten Media Days, they're just out there balling, right? It wasn't going to be a year that they were going to win the Big Ten, but now really with the plan so far off the rails, they rolling into Lincoln kind of plays as a Super Bowl because that's just we're Nebraska. Everything's big. Whether or not we're good, we're going to be in the national media. We're going to be in the news. I want Nebraska to just establish themselves early and don't hit the cruise control. I want it to be a very 56-7 Scott Frost win for the Matt Rule and the Huskers. I really think that this Northwestern team has holes and we need to expose them and continue to pound them. Ben Bryant is very calm in the pocket. Like I said, it's his 6th year of college. I think it's imperative for Nebraska on the defensive side of the ball to really put pressure on him. And sometimes Nebraska's been great at that. Sometimes they've struggled with it. I think on the outside, you have to look at Samford, second game starting at the University of Nebraska on defense. He's been great on special teams all 3 years that he's been here. I love him. True Husker. But he kind of earned his black shirt stripe net last week. I think he can make a big impact this week for them in the free safety spot in replacement of Deshaun Singleton. The outside's been good. Q's been great. Malcolm Hartzog's been great. The linebacking core needs to be a little bit better. I thought Bullock missed a couple of tackles last week, didn't play his best game, but I think he would agree with that. He needs to get back into a groove. Heinrich was actually shockingly good last week for kind of what we've seen for him since he's been back. He's a good player, but he struggles to cover guys in the flat. So he needs to do that again because, like I said, we're going to force this Northwestern team to throw the ball quite a few times. And that's going to be imperative if Nebraska wins. Looking at the rest of Northwestern's schedule, let's take a look. They lost to Rutgers to open up the year 24-7. Then they beat the hell out of UTEP, who's awful. Then they lost at Duke. It's probably the toughest team they play out of conference. Duke's a pretty good football team if you haven't watched them. 38-14, they lost to them. Then they beat Minnesota in that wild comeback. Then they lost to Penn State at home, 41-13. That was a weird game, a lot of rain. I wouldn't take too much away from that. Penn State's a really good football team. And then they beat Howard, like I said, 23-20 2 weeks ago. Go back and watch that game. Northwestern's not very polished, man. This is a team that you can dominate as long as you don't have self-inflicted wounds, which we like to do that sometimes. So we got to be careful with what we ask. But Nebraska should be successful this week. I like our odds. We're an 11-point favorite right now. It opened at 11.5, came down a half a point. I think it's in a good spot. I think we cover. I think Nebraska wins this game, probably like a 27 or 31-13 style game. I think the Black Shirts are just too good, and they kind of know what they're doing. They're flying around on defense. Isaac Gifford's going to lead them to another great week, and I think the offense kind of finds their stride through the run game against this shaky Northwestern run defense. So I think it's going to be a successful week for the Huskers. Let me know what you think the score is going to be in the comments below. Please drop a subscription. And if you haven't gone back and listened to the Week 8 preview, give it a listen. It's going to drop on Thursday. I'm sorry. The Week 7 recap's dropped. The Week 8 recap will drop tomorrow. So thanks for tuning in. Go Big Red, and let's get a W.